Chapter 2, Beginning. Title of this essay is On Unlearning from Habits of the Creative Mind, 2nd edition, written by Richard E. Miller and Ann Jurecic. On Unlearning. When students enter our writing classes, they often bring with them a set of rules from high school that they rely on to define good writing. They believe every paragraph should start with a topic sentence that states the paragraph's main point. They are certain all good essays have 5 sections or paragraphs: an introduction that states the essay's thesis, 3 descriptive body paragraphs, each of which discusses a different example that supports the essay's thesis, and a conclusion that restates what has been said in the previous sections. And finally, they think no good essay ever uses the word I. Or rather we, assume you are familiar with these rules, since they've been repeated in writing classrooms for decades. Good grades tend to be assigned to writing that follows these rules, but do these rules really produce good writing? Think about it. When was the last time you ran across a 5-paragraph essay outside of school? Try looking for one in a news source, a magazine, a book, or even a collection of essays. You might find a modified version of one in an op-ed piece, but most of the writing you find that has any power will be organized quite differently. The 5-paragraph essay, it turns out, is a very limited form, one best suited to the work of making and supporting simple claims. For teachers uninterested in teaching writing, the 5-paragraph essay has the virtue of being easy to skim and thus easy to grade. In college classes, professors often expect students writing to do a kind of work that is well beyond the reach of the 5-paragraph essay: contending with complexity. You may have had a professor who asked you to develop an argument by working with a handful of original sources, each with a competing point of view, or to support a new interpretation of a text not discussed in class, or to synthesize a semester's worth of lectures into a thoughtful reflection on a multifaceted problem. When professors compose assignments like these, they assume you know how to use your writing to grapple with a genuine problem, puzzle, or question. They assume you've got something else in your writing quiver beside the formula for the 5-paragraph theme. So why don't we just give you a new set of rules? A set of rules capacious enough to provide directions for handling the range of writing tasks college students encounter: the response paper in introductory history, the seminar project in advanced economics, the 7 to 8 page argument for a 300-level psychology or politics or anthropology class. As appealing as this solution is, it's not one that is available to us, or to you, because there's not one set of rules for generating good writing that works within any given or any single discipline, let alone across multiple disciplines. The reason for this is not, as is often supposed, that any judgment of writing quality is inevitably arbitrary, but rather that writing quality is always a function of context. Thus, what makes for a good paper in a literature class doesn't automatically make for a good paper in a history class or an econ class. Indeed, it may not even make for a good paper in a literature class taught by a different professor. How then does anyone in any discipline learn how to write about questions that require complex, nuanced responses? The first step involves unlearning the rules that are at the core of the 5-paragraph essay. Taking that first step may seem impossible. We can't unlearn how to walk or how to talk. These habits are so deeply ingrained that it would take a catastrophe of some kind, either psychological or physical, to unseat them. And we can't unlearn how to ride a bike or how to swim. We may forget how to over time, but when we return to these activities after a long hiatus, our challenge is not to learn how to do them as if for the first time, but to remember what's involved in keeping the bicycle upright or our body afloat and moving through the water. Writing is unlike these other activities because each act of writing is not a straightforward repetition of what you've written before. Writing something new requires that you make choices about why you're writing, whom you're writing for, what you think, and what you want your writing to accomplish. So when we say you should unlearn what you learned about writing in school, we mean we want you to actively resist the idea that writing is governed by a set of universal rules which, if followed, will clearly communicate the writer's ideas to the reader. We can't tell you to forget what you've learned. That would have the same paradoxical effect as telling you not to think about an elephant. And we can't say you shouldn't have been taught the rules governing the 5-paragraph essay because, within an educational system dominated by the industry of standardized testing, you had to be able to demonstrate that you could produce writing that follows those rules. What we are asking you to do is to question the two foundational assumptions that motivate teachers to assign 5-paragraph essays. Namely, that writing's central function is to generate arguments, and that the very best writing does this in ways that are simple, straightforward, and immediately understandable by all. What do we propose in place of these assumptions? That you practice the habits of mind of experienced writers. Experienced writers tend to be curious and attentive. They choose to engage deeply with sources, ideas, people, and the world they live in. They are mentally flexible, self-reflective, and open to new ways of thinking, attributes that allow them to adapt to unfamiliar circumstances and problems. And they are persistent, resisting distraction and disappointment, accepting that writing down thoughts which haven't been written before is hard work. When you commit yourself to practicing these habits, curiosity, attentiveness, openness, flexibility, reflectiveness, and persistence, you will also be committing yourself to making a habit of creativity, the practice of inventing novel and useful connections, compelling ideas, and thoughtful prose. As you delve into habits of the creative mind, you'll see that we've designed the book to give you practice developing these habits. Working your way through the book won't lead to mastery of a formula for good writing. Instead, you'll develop the habits of mind that increase your sensitivity to context and that allow you to use your writing to explore the unknown. You'll be practicing using your writing to show to others and yourself how your mind, not any mind, not every mind, but your particular mind works on a problem. Practice Session 1, an institutional autobiography. Practice, beginning, orienting, paying attention. Activity, note-taking, reflecting, writing. On Unlearning makes a series of generalizations about the current state of secondary education and, more specifically, about what students are taught to think writing is for. But we know our description isn't true for every student in every classroom. So for this practice session, we want you to reconstruct your personal history as a reader and as a writer in school. What were your formative experiences? Was there a teacher who helped you significantly improve your writing? A specific assignment? Were there events that discouraged you from thinking of yourself as a writer or as a creative person? After you've spent time reflecting, remembering, and taking notes, we want you to write up your own institutional autobiography, in which you document and discuss your experiences with reading and writing in school. Your autobiography should present an account of both moments of learning and moments of unlearning or frustration. Ideally, you will be able to refer directly to papers you've written in the past. Maybe they're stored on your hard drive or in your email archive. Your autobiography will provide a snapshot of how you elevate yourself or how you evaluate yourself as a reader and a writer at the beginning of your time working with habits of the creative mind. As you move through the book's essays and practice sessions, you can return to your autobiography to see if your sense of what reading and writing are for has changed as a result of your efforts to use writing as a technology for thinking new thoughts. Practice session 2, how writers write. Habits: beginning, exploring, paying attention. Activities: annotating, note-taking, writing. At the end of Habits of the Creative Mind, we've included 1 collaboratively authored reading and 4 single-authored readings, one of which is, in its original form, a single paragraph long. We'd like you to choose one of these readings to explore our assertion that essays show a mind at work on a problem. If we're right about this, it means that idea-rich essays offer the reader an opportunity to learn how the essay writer's mind works. For this to happen, though, the reader has to guard against the idea that there's one way to write well, one way to make a convincing argument, one use for writing. In the reading you've selected, annotate the essay by identifying where you see signs of the writer's curiosity, attentiveness, openness, flexibility, reflectiveness, persistence, or creativity. Also note places where the writer breaks what you thought were rules of writing. Keep track of where the writer makes surprising choices, writing in ways you thought were risky or violated the rules. Then consider how, if your mind were at work on the same problem, your essay would differ from the one you've chosen to examine. After you've annotated the essay, and after you've identified moments when the writer has made interesting or puzzling moves, draft a report on what you've learned about how the writer you've engaged with works on a problem. Practice session 3. Explore educational reform. Habits: beginning, connecting, exploring. Activities: comparing, researching, writing. Can curiosity and creativity be learned, unlearned, relearned? For this practice session, we'd like you to work with Danielle Allen's What is Education For?, included in the reading section, pages 270 through 281. Francine Prose's Close Reading, Learning to Write by Learning to Read, published in The Atlantic in 2006. And Ken Robinson's Do Schools Kill Creativity?, a TED Talk presented in 2006. Allen, Prose, and Robinson are all interested in education reform. After reading the pieces by Allen and by Prose, and after watching the lecture by Robinson, spend time considering how to answer these 3 questions. How does each of them think education should be reformed? Where do their ideas for reform come into conflict with one another? What is your own sense of what education is or might be for? After answering these questions, write a response essay in which your goal is to convene a conversation between these thinkers and to then move the discussion forward. You're not establishing who's right and who's wrong. Instead, you're using the words of these thinkers to generate meaningful insight into the challenges and the possibilities of educational reform. For an example of what this might look like, return to the essay on habits and review the conversation we developed between the self-help books of Dale Carnegie and Stephen Covey and our own effort to move the discussion about habits in a new direction with Habits of the Creative Mind. A little tripped up on the end there, sorry about that.